Yes.
Hope so after the last shenanigan we had.
A special council meeting, okay. Ready to go? Okay, folks, we'd like to call the meeting to order. Thanks everybody for being here. And I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as presented, please.
Mayor, can you,
Oh, the Aboriginal Acknowledgement.
no, the resolution to start the meeting
Start
at
early.
5 p.m. rather than 4:30, sorry.
I'm your guy.
Moved, second. All in favor? Carried, thanks. Okay, now the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered as traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, Silix and Sinix peoples and as home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honour their connection to the land, rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Now we'll have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Morrison. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting on the 28th, and hopefully everybody has the chance to browse through those. Councillor Charlwood, mover, second by Councillor Page. All in favour? Thank you. Presentations, Nelson Hydro budget. And this is continuing from October the 18th. This must be a pretty big document you got going here, Scott. Hey?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to wrap up the presentation that my staff did on the 18th of October and answer any questions or further questions that the Council may have with respect to Nelson Hydro's budget and operations for 2022. So it's exactly 1 year to the day since I was first introduced to Nelson City Council as your General Manager for Nelson Hydro. And what a year that's been.
Just your average.
I won't belabor this point. We have had a challenging year. Some of the COVID implications that I spoke to at the presentation on the 27th of September are starting to become more real. I talked about procurement delays, and so that's something that I think we're going to be living with through well into 2022. I'm already starting to see some of the things that we've been planning on finishing this year starting to slip because of delays in everything from streetlights to transformers to even small things. So that's going to be an interesting challenge for us, and we're going to continue with working with a community that's on edge. We talked about just the challenge that my team has in terms of customer service and working with people, and it's difficult times and people are challenged by that, and that's something that I just want to make sure that council acknowledges. It's one of the reasons that we're really focusing on customer service and communication this year as we move forward with this, because it's so important to make sure people understand what's happening in their utility. I showed this slide in the budget preliminary, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of items. We have seen a few things shift in the time that we've received the Q3 updates. So there's been a little bit of an increase in some of our operating expenses in terms of our forecast for 2021. And same with our capital. We're hoping we can squeeze in a few more capital items that we had planned. And I'm already sort of worried that maybe we're starting to, when this was prepared, there was a few items that we hadn't realized that might be delayed. So we'll see if we can achieve that, but this is where it's looking. When I presented to council on the 27th of September, I had indicated that we would likely be transferring about $75,000 into the capital reserve this year. And right now I'm saying we're actually going to be withdrawing about 137. We'll see where we make out in the end, but it's not as substantial. It doesn't make a difference in the overall impact of our decisions around 2022, but just wanted to highlight that we have updated our forecast in the time since I last presented this to you. I thought I would take this opportunity to also just present to council some of the more strategic items that we've been working on this past year that have been on my mind. Coming into the role in my first year, I really was forced to open up the books and sort of look and see where some of the things that we could work on delay. One of those items was the BC Hydro Water Rights Agreement. This was an agreement originally signed in 1989, re-signed in 2006 for a 35-year term. And that is the agreement that gives us the 265 cubic feet per second water license that we see the water license reserve that is transferred to the city of Nelson every year. But also part of that agreement was a power purchase agreement that gave BC Hydro the right to purchase power at essentially City of Nelson's cost. So in 1989, that was 0.6 of a cent per kilowatt hour. In 2006, that was revised to 0.7 of a cent per kilowatt hour. Because we are currently in a position where we are always purchasing power from Fortis BC, we're never at a point where we have excess power. That means that we're buying power from Fortis BC to replace this purchase power at $4 cents and 4.744 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a 4-cent difference between what we're selling it at and what we're having to purchase back at. So I've been discussing with BC Hydro. We've now entered into formal negotiations, and it's actually gone well. We've had some good exchanges of data and information. They see our position and have now presented a counter proposal that may come to some resolution, but I wanted to make council aware of that because it is important to sort of understand sort of, you know, this, and it will have a material impact on Nelson Hydro's costs in the end once we do resolve it, and hopefully we can get there. Councillor Lochtenberg.
Scott, is that over and above? Do they get that off the top, or is that after we've delivered power to the city?
It's in the middle. It's a window, we'll say. Because of the stacking of the water licenses, they get the 714 cubic feet per second after our firm water license of 1693, but before our conditional water license of 812. So they get the middle part. So it's only during freshet. So, you know, when freshet starts and we start generating more than our 9.1 megawatts, then they get the first 3 megawatts of that. And then you know, beyond that, then that's Nelson Hydro's power as well. So it's a very complicated sort of situation, and it took a lot to negotiate it in '89 and again renew it in 2006. I've asked BC Hydro if they'd be willing to renegotiate the power purchase price mid-term. We're 15 years into the agreement, and so far they're cooperating, working with us. Whatever we come up with, if we make any changes at all, it will need to go to the BCUC for approval. So from my perspective, I think that's a good thing, because I think BCUC will see it as any adjustment to be in our favor would be more fair than what we currently have.
That'd be the cheapest power that BC Hydro is buying anywhere, wouldn't it?
It is, yeah. Well, at times, in really high water years, they can purchase it more cost effectively from the market. Sometimes there's even negative pricing. So the power market is very complex, and so BC Hydro has not called for us to sell them power every year, but the years like this one that we do, we've been obliged to provide them with that energy.
And I'll just add, so this related to, that settlement where the city felt we had lost water rights when the canal was built. So that's what the 265 is. That was compensation for that. So that certainly works in our favor. And there is some, language in that agreement that works in our favor as well. And, Scott's done an excellent job of not only identifying that, but also, what the conditions would have been in '89. And in fact, we, I think, concluded that likely that was, even selling at that really cheap price was probably beneficial to the city way back then. You just didn't have the options at that time, and our demand has grown a lot since that as well. So, so I think just an excellent job of being able to bring those forward with supporting documentation and they're I don't think they're feeling as confident to say no, just because of the information that was brought forward, which was good, solid reasoning documentation. It wasn't weren't grasping at straws. There was and I think they see that. So and it sounds positive from what Scott's told me so far, but.
Yeah, more to follow. BC Hydro has indicated that they would like to come to some sort of agreement before the end of this year, so that we can file with the BCUC in time to be able to have it approved for freshet of 2022. So it may start to move quickly. It's been a bit of a slow process up until now, but now that they're sort of willing to they've made an initial offer. The ball's now in our court to evaluate that, and we'll be getting back with them in a few weeks, and hopefully it'll go in our favor. One of the or a couple of other items that I've been working on, we have a joint use agreement with Telus. It was signed in 1984. Over time, there was a gentleman's agreement that Telus would provide a little bit of maintenance costs to offset the costs incurred by City of Nelson to maintain the joint poles. We're a little bit unique in the region where we actually split the cost of all of our poles 50% with Telus, all joint use poles 50% with Telus. Others just rent space to Telus, and there's a different arrangement there. So our agreement has been a little bit different, and the maintenance has been a bit of a sore point with Nelson's for some time. So we've had some prolonged negotiations interrupted by fires and all those kinds of things. But we have an agreement in principle right now, and it looks like it's going to be significant improvement in that maintenance agreement over what we have had in the past. And it does also have an impact on our overall budget. We do have almost 5,000 joint use poles in our system. So, increasing the maintenance on a per pole basis threefold is going to have an impact for us. So it's looking positive. The other one that we've actually signed is the Fortis BC joint use agreement. It isn't as impactful. We only have 20 joint use poles, which we have lines attached to the Fortis BCs. So it's us paying Fortis for that. But we have signed an agreement. It's backdated to 2017, so I'm going to be renegotiating it again next spring or next summer. But it's a fairly standard agreement that all of the other BC municipal electrical utilities have the same rate, so it shouldn't be too cumbersome. But we're at least at this point, we now have the same agreement as everyone else. And if you recall, part of the regulatory discussions, the BCUC ordered us to engage with Fortis BC at a senior level with regards to reliability. I did exchange correspondence with their Senior Vice President of Operations and Engineering back in August. And one of the things I requested was that we establish a continuous improvement committee with Fortis BC. I didn't want to have just lip service and them saying yes, we're working on it. That's we'll improve. And they've met once, and my team has been engaged with them over the last few weeks, and it's looking positive in terms of some of the things that they're discussing and looking at joint data to help things. And I've asked them to focus on areas where we can make a difference by cooperating. Fortis BC has a number of initiatives that they are engaged in themselves, and they're just going to report to us on how that's going. And so far, data is showing that their projects are having some positive impact, or it would appear to be. But what I wanted my team to focus on was some of the things that we can connect with them, that we can make a difference. So our points of interconnection, are we moving electricity most efficiently, and is there better ways that we can do that? And potentially, as we look at bigger projects like a new intertie on the North Shore, can they, help streamline that process and make it easy for us? Outage technology and data, sharing that data so that we're actually sort of working off similar data sets and so that they understand sort of the impact that their outages are having on us and vice versa. And then just generally sort of joint operating, so the communication and processes between my staff and Fortis BC staff, because 1 minute of outage for Fortis BC is exactly one customer outage minute, but for Nelson Hydro, 1 minute of outage on, say, the North Shore, 2,500 customers, that's 2,500 minutes of outage time for our customers. So that's negatively impacting our reliability. And what I've asked Fortis BC to do is let's look at the minutes, like how long does it take someone to pick up the phone and have those conversations and make that switching happen so that we can get things on as quickly as possible. And then the last item was is there any opportunities for joint resources? If we have crews in an area and they identify a problem, is there some way we can work together? I don't know if any of these things are going to produce any significant improvements, but we're having the conversation and it's going very well. Fortis is working well with us. So, yes.
Future. I was just wondering, like, with our particular situation here, where we have, like, I'm thinking of the North Shore, where it's this long, strung out situation, where one tree goes down and the whole thing goes out. Is in these discussions, is the locality discussed, like the challenges of this particular locality with the BCUC, or is it just is all hydro just kind of seen as one thing across BC in terms of risk factors and how much it goes out and that kind of thing?
I believe
they bring in the geography.
Yeah, I believe that the BCUC understands, that our situation is perhaps different than other utilities. We have certainly stressed it in our filings and rationalizations around our reliability statistics and things like that. Even comparing us against Fortis BC, whose majority of their infrastructure is in the Okanagan, where there's much fewer trees and that sort of type of terrain is different. So we have stressed that, and I believe the BCUC understands it. They also still expect that we provide service, and certainly the customers, Nelson Hydro customers, have made that known through the BCUC process. I believe I mentioned that we received 145 letters of comment on our filing applications, and almost every one of them said reliability is terrible. My power goes out too often.
But the reliability on your graphs was very high, right?
That's availability, yeah, and statistically speaking, yeah. People's expectations are that when they flick the light switch, it's 100% on, and especially in this day and age where connectivity is so important, even short outages, which people wouldn't have had batted an eye about in the past, are now impactful. People are missing their meetings, they're not able to sort of work from home, there's things like that. So I believe the expectations of customers is increasing over time.
Thank you.
And two other items that Council is aware of. Council asked us to look at all options with respect to the rural service areas. So I just wanted to assure Council that we are looking at that. We have been engaged with Fortis BC around their potential procurement of the rural assets. They're conducting their due diligence. We've been answering information requests and have toured some of their technical staff through our system, and we'll continue to engage on that with them. And we're also looking at what kind of potential restructuring might be available to Nelson Hydro that might alleviate some of the confusion or challenges the BCUC has with respect to Nelson, who's straddling both a municipal as well as a regulated utility area. So we're getting advice from legal counsel around that, and we'll be hopefully putting together something that we can bring council up to speed on. But So I'm going to shift over to our 2022. This is the same slide as you would have seen on the 27th. I haven't changed it. The reasons, for, the rate increase and things that are impacting what we're doing in 2022 are here. We've spoke at length. My staff presented to you all the details on each of these. That moves us to this budget for 2022. It has not materially changed. There's been a little bit of moving things around, but for the most part, it is substantially the same as what council saw. Still results in a fairly sizable withdrawal from our capital reserve. I showed council this diagram before with the 2.5% increase. We're still able to keep our capital reserve for 2022 within that $5 to $10 million range, but we've extrapolated that 2.5% out for future, and you can see that it does dip below the 5 million. It stays above 3 million, which is what BCUC said would be unacceptable to go below that. For now, we're going to propose 2.5% sort of out into the future. As I said, because we have so much uncertainty around the results of our cost of service analysis and rate design application that we've submitted to the BCUC. I showed council this prior, and this is what happens to that same graph if you include the increased in revenues from rural residential customers if they were to if BCUC were to approve that rate design that we've proposed at 5.72% over 3 years.
Again, I just want to clarify, this is assuming all that rate increase goes into capital reserves. The COSA clearly showed that it was a reduction, or the return to the owner, which is the city, isn't at the level. Well, in the rural area, there is no return at this present time. So it'll be ultimately up to council how much you would want to take into general revenues, how much you would want to invest back in the utility and capital reserves. So this is all of that money go in one place, but that ultimately is a decision of council. And again, I think that as we went through this process and those clarities of roles between council and the utility commission is something that would be beneficial to be much clearer. For example, capital reserves, we are saying, that's generated from urban ratepayers, and does the utility commission have any say on what capital reserve levels that council chooses to maintain or not? That's those type of questions, and that's where it's right now. It's quite blurry. I think they're into council's business where they probably shouldn't be, and not really any fault of their own. We just haven't had the the financial data to be able to separate the two and have a true COSA. And we certainly, in the final argument, identified this will be once a COSA is accepted, it's the first time the utility commission can actually regulate the rural utility in a fulsome way. In the past, they really didn't have any choice other than base it on the utility as a whole, but now they do. Now they do have the right information. They can regulate it same way they regulate others. So but as long as it's one utility, and we certainly will account for it as the two separate pieces, but it's a bit challenging, both for customers, why is this asset accounted for this way, or this cost, or whatever, and for the utility commission. So certainly a benefit of formally separating, whether it's a municipal corp or something similar, would create that clarity. The rural utility would in effect, hold some of its own assets, and it would, you'd be able to account for it as a entity as opposed to, part of an entity.
Thanks, Kevin. Councillor Lockenberg, Councillor Page. Go ahead.
So we so it's a question and then a comment. The first question is related to BC. So the new, as we all know, the province came up with their new climate plan yesterday, I guess, and in it you can see like a dramatic increase in electricity demand. It's just inevitable, significant. Does BCUC consider future demand, particularly given government policy, in some of these decision making? Because I'm asking that because of the demand side management part of running a utility. You want to look at forecast future demand and then manage it. And interestingly, that sort of dovetails with our climate goals too, that if we're trying to encourage people to save energy and so that we can deliver a reliable, effective service going forward, we really need to look at that side. And I know the other utilities like Fortis and BC Hydro have an entire DSM part of their business, whereas we don't. I guess we kind of have EcoSave, but we don't really have a DSM in Nelson Hydro. So I guess my question is, should we? And should we be starting to fund it properly? And number two is, does BCUC consider that, or are they asking for that, or should we expect them to ask that given the latest plan for the province?
Yeah. Would you like me to respond to that? Yeah, so, EcoSave is our demand side. It's something that Nelson Hydro entered in voluntarily. The other utilities have been directed to do so, but I think it has been more of a government directive than the BCUC. I understand that there's some new directives that BCUC has received from the government that is forcing them to consider climate change and the province's climate goals in some of their decisions, so that it's not completely, rate-based and cost-based, which has sort of been a lot of the fundamentals. We have, as utilities, have been functioning sort of in that realm because we see that demand-side management is, in the long term, the cheapest power that we can get. It's power that you don't use, not power that you have to build a whole new generating station. So utilities have been on board for a while, and programs are relatively robust, and our EcoSave program is a good one. And we'll continue to look for opportunities to expand and offer more opportunities to have, to allow people to reduce energy consumption. And I'm expecting that the BCUC is going to be looking for those kinds of programs in a state. I don't believe they've ever asked Nelson Hydro, or ordered Nelson Hydro to have anything like that, but they have accepted the EcoSave program as a legitimate operating expense.
And the other piece of that is, as a large Fortis BC wholesale customer, we do fall under their DSM program. So all of their programs are available to Nelson Hydro customers as well. So we traditionally, basically supplemented that with EcoSave, but that's, we've traditionally looked at that as our DSM program, and they, as you say, they have a whole department that does that, and they have certainly more clout with government to negotiate what those are, and as Scott said, actually have directives to implement some of those things, but EcoSave basically sells Fortis's rebate programs in effect, right?
Thanks. I wanted us to go back a little bit to the two strategic initiatives we have for 2022, and get you a little bit to draw the owl for the public's benefit, because we obviously know everyone knows about the investigation about a Fortis procurement of the rural assets, but I don't think a lot of people understand what else council has directed Nelson Hydro to look at when it comes to potentially restructuring pieces of Nelson Hydro for their benefit, for our benefit, and for everyone's clarity. So I was hoping you could just elaborate a little bit more on what those options might look like, because I think it's a really important option that we will be considering at some point of the three, aka do nothing, procure to Fortis, or restructure Nelson Hydro.
Certainly, I can I can address that at least as a straw dog. When we look at the Nelson Hydro as a whole, one of the options that has potential is to restructure Nelson Hydro into a single or perhaps multiple municipal corporations. Those are used for various reasons by municipalities to separate certain functions outside of the municipal workings, and utilities is one of them. So there's a number of municipalities within BC who have separated out district heat utilities and things like that from the workings of the municipality. Those tend to have a board of directors and a partnership agreement with the municipality, but are somewhat arm's length from the actual workings of the city itself. And we are exploring options in terms of what that might look like to try and be able to create a bit more separation so that the rural assets of Nelson Hydro are more clearly distinguishable and easier for BCUC to regulate as compared to the city-owned assets like our city infrastructure and the generation assets.
Supplemental, if I can. We hear a lot, and it's in our arguments to the BCUC on the impact our ability to raise funds through debt are impacted by our other city operations. If we were to go down the route of a separated local government corporation, does that change? Is that corporation capable of accessing different debt or not impacting our debt load the way we would be now, or is the community charter still at play there?
No, the community charter will still be at play. I think our understanding at this stage is really that capital is still going to have to be provided through the city to the corporation. The city would own all the shares. It's not like there'd be third-party shares, and the borrowing. The inspector would still would consider. You're not going to be immune from the municipality to. On your borrowing either. So it's probably not so much on, that capitalization side of it. It's really more, there is some ability to reduce some liability risk, and probably from my end, the most important thing is now you actually have probably two entities that can transact a little bit more clearer with each other, and generation's a good example. We'd probably enter into a sales and purchase agreement, similar to what Scott was talking about. The water rights agreement is basically that. So it's clear, right? Here's the agreement on that. Right now, that was contentious over time. It's clear from the records that we see that was the intent of council in the beginning, to sell surplus generation. Certainly it wasn't their intent to make surplus generation or their generating assets part of the rural utility. So you'd be able to create those clarity, but it's still going to be somewhat complex because we have joint use assets. So what do you do with those? Again, I think it allows you to probably the urban side would probably own those joint use assets and lease those or part of those to the urban or to the rural side as an example. So it would just allow you to do those transactions a little more transparently, and the utility commission then has the opportunity to really look at those. Is that lease rate appropriate based on their principles? Is that sale of generation appropriate based on their principles and not get into the city business on how you operate generation. So.
Sorry, one more. if
Yeah, go
I may.
ahead.
Sorry to open up a can of worms, everyone, but is it a foregone conclusion that we wouldn't have third-party shares, or that it would only be the city that would own that corporation? Is that a foregone conclusion?
I don't believe you can be a municipal corporation
Okay.
if there's other shareholders, then you're a corporation, and the city could be own shares in a corporation. I think, maybe not getting offside in terms of what we can invest in or not invest in, and that's, yeah, it would be different than a municipal corporation if you had other shareholders.
Okay, thanks.
But just to follow up on that, would it be different in any significant way? Like,
Tax rate.
Well, yeah, you would become taxable first off. We'd have to determine whether we could actually invest in that type of corporation, because there's restriction on what the city can invest in, so I don't think you see that in the municipal side. You can enter into a partnering agreement with the private sector to help deliver your services, so I think there are some options. I don't know necessarily why the city would want third-party investors, especially on the regulated side of it. Again, the urban side of it, it's, how this COSA shakes out will be quite informative on all of those fronts. Because right now, for example, on the unregulated side, we don't necessarily fall into their regulations. So there's, on all our other assets, if you wanted to sell them at fair market value, in fact, the community charter actually requires you to sell them at fair market value unless you have a partnering agreement. So, whereas on the regulated side, you have to sell them at book value because the customer has sort of paid for part of those assets. So all those things make this, getting to where we need to get to, and getting that clarity of exactly, and doing that separation so that you don't have the utility commission, like I said, involved in in council's side of the business, and right now it's a bit muddy.
Thanks, Kevin. As long as those shares are not brick shares. You got some of those, didn't you, John?
Carry on, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the questions and conversation, and we do hope to bring both of those issues back to council with more details and a more fulsome discussion at a later date. But I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we are moving forward with those, but we're not quite at the stage, as you can hear, where we can talk definitively about what our options really look like and what the impacts are for the city or Nelson Hydro at this time. I just want to remind council that this was a slide that I presented on the 27th, proposing that we move forward with the urban rate rebalancing as part of our 2022 rate increases. So what that effectively looks like is over the next 3 years, urban residential rates would increase by 4% per year, and urban commercial rates would decrease by 4% per year. I've prepared some comparison slides to give council an idea of what rates would look like at various consumption levels. So this first one is with just our 2.5% rate increase. So I've included Fortis BC's rate increase of 3.46, and I've assumed a 0% rate increase for BC Hydro because that's the last forecast that I've seen from BC Hydro. I don't have any new information on what their rate structure is at this time, so they're remaining stagnant from the last 2 years effectively. on these graphs. But what this shows is that with the 2.5% rate increase, we remain, slightly higher than BC Hydro for lower consumption levels, but we are, significantly lower than Fortis BC for all consumption levels with that 2.5% rate increase. Now, because we're talking about the urban rate rebalancing, so for urban residential, and these graphs are all for residential customers, that would be a 6.5% increase with that urban rate rebalancing for 2022. I've left Fortis at 3.46, so you still see that over all rate or consumption levels, Nelson Hydro is still significantly lower than Fortis BC, and approaching parity with BC Hydro for the higher consumption levels. And then if we just switch gears to the rural side, the 5.2% or 72% COSA increase that is now before the BCUC would result in an 8.22% increase for our rural residential customers. And again, we are still below Fortis BC for all rate classes, more significantly so in the higher consumption levels, and slightly above, if not on par with BC Hydro's high consumers.
Just for clarity, the reason why Fortis's are typically higher, given that it's all regulated, is because BC Hydro's predominant customer base is the Lower Mainland. Fortis is more rural areas like the Okanagan. Is that why?
Certainly, that's a part of the argument that Fortis would make. I mean, it's all based on their cost of service analysis. So, they've been able to prove to the BCUC that their rates are fair, justified, and reasonable.
We should be sort of benchmarking ourselves against Fortis, not BC Hydro.
Yes, and BC Hydro has also got, it's a bit more complicated because it is a crown corporation and it has a debt reserve that, every now and again gets, absorbed by the
Ratepayers.
Taxpayers across the province.
Whole province, including us.
Taxpayers, including us.
And it is
Including us
often,
is the important part.
and the government of BC has often, directed BC Hydro and, BCUC to freeze rates or hold rates at, economic levels for reasons other than cost of service. So while it's interesting that we are still below BC Hydro for some of our rate classes, it is a somewhat of an artificial benchmark in terms of fair, just, and reasonable for Nelson Hydro, given economies of scale, given sort of the other restrictions that we are faced with, and BC Hydro is servicing huge urban customers, so the cost to service a customer in downtown Vancouver is significantly less than what it would be for someone in Balfour.
Yeah.
And I think they also, Neil came from BC Hydro, and they have some significant infrastructure deficits that they're just not funding.
Right.
And, which isn't the case with us, or the case with Fortis. We are funding our infrastructure, and in fact putting reserves away to replace future infrastructure as well. And if you took the capital reserves out of there, it would be probably substantially under BC Hydro as well.
I can tell you right now that on a cost per customer basis and a cost, a number of staff per customer basis, sort of any metric you want to measure, Nelson Hydro compares extremely favorably compared to Fortis BC and BC Hydro.
Councillor Charwood.
Thanks, Scott. I had two, I hope, quick questions. One, you mentioned at the highest consumption rate residentially, the margins are larger, I guess.
Yes.
Right? Can you see an opportunity there in the future to grow? Like if you're consuming, maybe there shouldn't be a benefit to consuming more. There should be. Right? Can you see where that question's going?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can. So, one of the reasons why the rates, we compare very favorably with higher consumer rates for BC Hydro and Fortis BC, as both of them have tiered rates. So at higher consumption levels, they charge more for their power. And Nelson Hydro has not moved towards that, and Fortis BC has indicated that they would like to move away from it. There's a number of different, reasons for the having the tiers and not having the tiers, and I haven't looked at that as an opportunity for Nelson Hydro to try and wade into developing a tier. There was a time when Nelson Hydro did have a tiered rate. I can't remember
Yeah,
when,
actually,
but
not on the residential side, more on the commercial side. We had actually declining block rates that went down as you consume more, and those were eliminated about 6 or 7 years ago. And I think that created that, maybe part of that, why our commercial rates kind of got out of sync. The one of the things that we've been particularly sensitive about is that people, especially in the rural area, don't have a alternative heating opportunity other than electrical or potentially wood. So it tends to be those heat customers that have higher consumption, and should they pay more because that's their only choice, versus in the city you spend on natural gas and you're never going to be up in those categories. So it doesn't tend to be, I think, energy wasters per se. It tends to be, what your primary heat source is that changes, most of those residential customers. So.
it tends to drive people to
I just think waste.
fossil
right?
fuel sort of heating sources, which is exactly the opposite of what we're hoping to achieve with our climate and energy plan.
Fair enough. Thanks. And that you were just kind of touched on the second question I had, if that's okay, Mayor, around that, people hear 4% increase for residential, 4% essentially equal decrease for commercial. Could you just review again some of the reasons for that decision?
Yeah, so the cost of service analysis that we did, that was the basis for the submission to the BCUC. The focus has been on our rural residential because it was clearly underfunding, like not recovering the costs that it was, taking to service those customers. But that same cost of service analysis looked at our entire utility. And on the urban side, as a whole, urban was, like the rates that we recover from the urban customers pay for the services the urban customers receive. But on a rate class perspective, the urban residential customers were underpaying and the urban commercial customers were overpaying relative to their cost of service. So, the focus for the BCUC has been on the rural side, but from a city perspective, we also need to address this imbalance within our own municipal boundaries. So the proposal to make that adjustment, is to try and make sure that those who are consuming the electricity are paying a fair rate for that. So it's just a part of the fair, just, and reasonable that the BCUC looks at, and council is absolutely at their will if you wish to adjust rates for urban or for residential or commercial to meet policy goals, but from a fair, just, and reasonable perspective, I'm saying we should follow the recommendations that the COSA made in terms of rebalancing the urban side of the business.
Yeah, and we'll bring some more detail to this, but I think I'm correct in saying it's mostly those large commercial customers that our rates are substantially higher than Fortis. We're not talking 4%, we're talking in some cases up to
48% for the highest rate class.
percent higher.
Yeah, our commercial, the higher commercial users are paying substantially more than what they would pay if they were a Fortis BC.
Right. Good. Thank you.
And I remember
Scott, whereabouts are you in your presentation?
I am essentially on my last slide.
Okay, we have two bylaws to manage here,
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah, so I
We
just
always
wanted,
seem to have you down to the wire. no
Yeah.
matter-
Poor guys, they're
And
gonna
it's
come
so,
back again.
I know, it's so interesting. We gotta find a different way. You're gonna get a complex after a while. We're booting you at the door when you're
Yeah.
down to your last slide or two, so.
no worries, Mr. Mayor and Council, and you're always welcome to drop by my office or pick up the phone and ask me questions outside of this forum, and I'm happy to sort of explain sort of any more details around, regulation or rates or any of the things that we've talked about today. So I'm just going to conclude with the recommendations. These are the same recommendations I had when I presented on the 27th. I believe Council already, made a motion of support for these recommendations at the October 18th. So unless there's any questions on that, I can wrap up. Okay. So finally, you heard my team on the 18th. I've got a really great dedicated team. They do a great job for me every day. We're out there serving our customers. And, the focus for 2022 is going to be on customer service, communications, increasing our reliability, and working on process efficiency so that we can, get more done for the same dollars that our ratepayers provide us with. So that's the end of my presentation, and any last comments or questions I'd be open
Councilor
to.
Morrison.
So Nora, I just want to move receipt of Scott's presentation and support for the 2.5 increase for the 2022 budget year.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Scott, thanks very much. And the presentation, the last presentation you were part of was excellent. And it instills a lot of confidence in me as the mayor that we have the people to deliver the goods for Nelson Hydro. And the other thing that I've noticed over the years too, that many people may not realize, all of these people live, work and play in and around our community. But we've been able to work with a lot of our local contractors as well and build their portfolio. And, as an example, Arrow and Martech and some of the tree companies that are doing vegetation management for us. So, and they all live and work in our communities as well. So thanks for the good work that Hydro is doing and all the staff that are involved in it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, folks, so with that, we're going to move on right away to the permissive tax exemption. And as a result of the council deliberations on permissive tax exemptions, the application is now requested to be adopted for the first of three readings of the permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3535
Should be an
2021. Oh, sorry, I'm reading what's in front of me here, so let me just read what the recommendation is. That the permissive tax exemption be finally adopted, number 3535 2021. Moved by Councillor Page, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much.
Mayor, if I could,
Yeah,
just one small thing. You may have read in the paper that Cooney Kids was selling their building.
yeah.
And so they're also on the list. So just to be clear, that with the change of ownership, BC assessment will take that into account, and with the change of that does not apply to them. So it's not like the owner gets this 3 years of tax exemption. That'll be taken care of even though you've adopted it today.
That's good.
Hope they didn't buy it for that reason.
No, I wouldn't think so, Councillor, but just so you're aware, because you might get asked about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All done?
Yep, we're done.
And the next one up, folks, is the council procedure bylaw. Ministerial order allowed council to hold electronic meetings during the pandemic, and that has now expired. The province is now adopted legislation to allow electronic meetings to be held where appropriate if a council chooses to include those abilities in its procedure bylaw, according to council procedure bylaw number 3534 2021 is now presented for council for adoption. And there's a recommendation the council procedure bylaw number 3534 2021 be finally adopted. Moved by Councillor Woodward, Councillor Charlwood. Any questions or comments?
One
Okay,
comment.
staff? All in favour?
Comment?
Comment.
Oh,
Comment as
sorry.
always.
Councillor Page,
I
sorry.
just wanted to highlight, I think this is the first time we have a full slate for this decision at council since this whole thing began. I think this is the first time we're all here.
In person, yeah.
Just
Just stating that.
Yeah, I like
stating
it.
that, and it's
I like
nice
it
to
like
see you.
this. It's better. Yeah, thank you.
Now you don't have to.
No, we don't. No, we don't. Of course, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
You can follow Scott and go home. All in favor? Carried, thanks. A motion to adjourn the special meeting, please,
Do we want to temporarily adjourn and then?
into the
go-
closed meeting when we come back.
I'm not sure how, if you want to go now or, and we'll continue in camera after the town meeting, or?
They only want us there for a maximum of 30 minutes
Yeah,
anyway,
so
so
we
we
can-
can keep
we
going.
don't-
Why don't we go 5:30 then?
That's,
Yeah,
yeah,
And then
yeah.
go to
5:30.
That's what I-
Motion
or
to
after that, yeah.
recess and go
We'll
into the
go
closed
in-
meeting?
We'll go in
Yeah.
camera, so just
Oh,
read
no.
the,
Take care, Scott.
All right, so a motion, we're going to move into closed meeting. A motion to move into the closed meeting, please. Councillor Woodward and Councillor Lockenberg, all in favor? Carried. Okay, adoption of the,
okay, well, I just need to, we're live, like we're streaming,
down.
so I just need to
okay,
shut
sorry, I
that
thought you were shut down already. I beg your pardon.